because I have a very, very awesome guest to introduce. Sean Spicer is with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Spicer.
Of course, Grace. Great to hear from you.
So, Sean, I have to ask you, you were President Trump's first press secretary, and I feel as though you got a lot of tough questions. There's no doubt about it. But there was one question that I don't think ever was brought to the forefront, and I think people were a little too easy on you, and I'm going to ask you it right now. For the record, what is President Trump's favorite ice cream flavor?
Grace, I can't get into this kind of stuff. This is very high level. The next thing you're going to ask me is whether or not he has a paint scheme for the next Air Force One. And like that, I'm going to have to direct you to the Department of Defense. These questions are a little above my pay grade.
You'll circle back,
way
though?
Too tough. I will circle back with you.
Sean, I'm amazed because I watch these press conferences, and I obviously think of yours. I think of Kayleigh McEnany's as well and Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I mean, these people were just totally brutal. And then now they're saying stuff, and I laugh because they say stuff like, on a lighter note. And then they ask their question, and I'm like, did anyone ever say to Sean Spicer, on a lighter note?
No. I will tell you, though, I've rebranded them. I don't think that they're press briefings. They are White House communications meetings, because when you think of the headlines and the stories that are coming out, it's almost like Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, is having a meeting with her own communications team and saying, okay, you write a story about this. You do a segment like this. Because between the how are the dogs doing, the ice cream flavors, the color of the plane, how he felt when he walked to the Oval Office, there hasn't been anything negative that's occurred in 7 days, despite millions of people losing their jobs, the pandemic not going too well, all of the role reversals that he has had. I mean, nothing has gone wrong. I had a reporter on my show the other night asking, okay, guys, what do you think of how your colleagues behaved? And I said, well, there hasn't been a single scandal yet. And I was like, okay, I mean, I guess Hunter Biden isn't a scandal. Maybe Frank Biden putting out an ad the day that his brother gets inaugurated, telling people how they might be able to get business. That's not a scandal. I mean, it's the mindset, the Washington Post fact checker telling people that there's no need to fact check because, it'll be just like Obama. And,
well, Sean, that was the part of it that was the part of it that really blew my mind. Your name was getting tossed around a lot. So I was watching the Twitter fight. I think it was Glenn Kessler. And he was going back and forth saying, oh, we're not going to fact check. And, we only fact check policy. And Stephen Miller at Red Steez was coming back and saying, you guys are fact checking Sean Spicer, like doing interviews about your fact checks about Sean Spicer.
But it's funny. But here's what I thought the fascinating part. First of all, when Glenn Kessler of the Washington Post did that interview, he said, look, during the 5 years of Obama, and I'm like, oh my goodness, he can't even get the number of years right. He needs to be fact-checked himself. That was number one. Number two, I thought to myself, are you clairvoyant? I mean, the idea, think about it, and I'm not, Joe Biden has run for president several times before and dropped out because of charges of plagiarism, right? He has made several, what the media likes to call gaffes, but other people might call lies or mistakes or false statements or misleading statements. They literally are saying, we don't need to because we know how it's going to go. I mean, that's interesting because I tell you, last week, Grace, the Powerball got up to $1 billion. I wish I had that level of ability to see into the future that the Washington Post fact checker has.
No, I totally agree. I played the Powerball and, well, you know how that goes. Sean, my next question for you, I'm talking to Sean Spicer from Spicer & Co. You guys can check him out on Newsmax. Actually, fun fact, I'm going to be on Sean's show tomorrow night, which I'm so excited about. There's been a lot of...
Yeah, Friday's the big quiz, Grace. Just FYI, we do that Friday quiz. And I'm just saying, you might want to study up tonight.
I know. Last time I did okay. I didn't do great, but I don't know if it was all on the level, so I'm going to give myself a pass on that. Sean, my question for you is: Biden's administration has issued so many executive orders already, more than any president in recent history, and a lot of, certain ones stick out to certain people. For me, it's the Keystone Pipeline, just because I find that that's a real way of just killing jobs right off the bat. What has Biden done in the last couple of days? Is there anything that sticks out to you as worse than the worst one of them all?
It depends on how you measure it. I think in terms of impact, the Keystone Pipeline and the minimum wage are up there because they are both going to kill jobs. I think the Keystone Pipeline, to me, is interesting because he basically sided with the environmentalists over the unions that had endorsed him, which is interesting because when it comes to schools and getting kids back to school, right, the CDC has said school's actually a pretty darn safe place to be. And so instead of siding with kids, he's siding with the teachers union in that case. So against the unions when it comes to jobs, for the teachers when it comes to sending kids back to school and them not necessarily wanting to go. But I think the other thing that was fascinating to me is in one of the first press briefings, he was asked by a reporter what his position on both the Mexico City policy and the Hyde Amendment are. Those are two policies that deal with the federal financing of abortion, both domestically and internationally. And instead of just answering the question, saying here's where he is or whatever, the White House press secretary said from the podium, I'm not going to answer him, but I'm going to tell you he's a devout Catholic. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you that everyone's religion is between themselves and God. I don't believe that it is right to go after somebody's relationship and discuss. But in this case, the White House press secretary from the podium is calling him a devout Catholic and saying, this is what's going to guide him. Well, okay, if that's what you're going to tell the American people from the White House podium, then I would seek to believe that you'll follow church doctrine, which says that abortion is wrong and that taxpayer financing shouldn't be used. But it is that level of deceitfulness that these folks are using right off of the bat, and it fascinated me because it didn't need to be that way. In other words, there was no one asked about his religion, no one asked what he personally believed. They asked what his policy was regarding two issues that he's done that. The other one that I think is mind-boggling to me is when on October 8th in Arizona, he was asked what your position is on packing the Supreme Court, growing the Supreme Court from its current 9 that it's been for 150 years to potentially 15. And he said, I'll tell you after the election. We're under 90 days left, and I don't think a single White House reporter has asked about that. And scant attention has been paid to the 12 million people, illegal immigrants that they want to give citizenship to. So, I mean, it runs the gamut, but it ceases to amaze me, though, the level and breadth and depth that it exists.
And I find it amazing, Sean, when he looks up from the desk after signing, executive order after executive order, and his staff is just barking at the press to get out of the room. Okay, everybody out. And then they grab him and they shuffle him into the background. It's like they're really scared that he's going to start to go off the cuff. And there's a little twinkle in his eye that says to me, he wants to take some questions. He wants to still think that he can do it. And they're deathly afraid of him answering those questions.
Goodness. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, even the other day, he couldn't figure out how to put the pen back in his pocket, and he was sitting there caught on mic saying, like, what does this mean? What does this say? And you're thinking to yourself, oh, my goodness, it's literally like they have tried to script as much of this as they can to the extent that it's available. But you're right, when he's not standing there in front of a teleprompter, I think the staff wigs out.
Yeah, and I have to say about Jen Psaki, and I'm not trying to pick on her or anything like that, Sean, but, you do have to be thick-skinned to be in that position. I'm sure you figured that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
She's gotten herself into a few little situations, like when Peter Doocy, who's the only one in the room who really asked her anything tough, asked her about why Biden was able to take his mask off on federal land. And she said, it's about sending a message, but what's the message if you just signed an order saying you have to wear a mask and then Biden doesn't wear it?
Right. She actually said, Grace, well, he was celebrating. By the way, she called Peter Doocy Steve twice. Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. There's only 14 people in that room. And again, I'm not cracking on her. It's a tough job. I think she's actually done a pretty good job of getting out there and doing this. But the idea that that's the toughest question that you get, which is, hey, you just signed an executive order requiring people to wear masks on federal property, and then within hours you're not doing it. And the answer is, well, he was celebrating. This is the problem right now with the left, with the mainstream media, with Hollywood, is that it's all about, what I say, not what I do, the hypocrisy that exists, and the idea that no one thinks that's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it is literally like standing there smoking a pack of Marlboro saying, hey, smoking's bad for you, you get cancer. And you're like, but you're doing it in front of me, blowing the smoke in my face. And they're like, yeah, so what's the point? And the idea that you don't see it. I mean, that's what baffles me the most, is that it was like laughed off. Like, what are you talking about? The guy's celebrating. Why would he wear a mask on federal property? Just because he signed a thing saying wear a mask on federal property like an hour ago?
Right.
Where are you coming with these crazy questions? I mean, it was like she was aghast that he would ask such a question. How dare you ask this stupid question about something that we just did requiring everyone else to do what we just didn't do. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, there does seem to be this mocking tendency when a Republican asks a decent question, that calls them out on their hypocrisy. They immediately start smirking and laughing like, oh, how could you care about that? Sean, my last question for you, and this is something I'm curious about. You were in that press room with all of these people, and I know that, the interviews and the questions, everything can get very contentious, but I'm just curious. Is there anyone who we would be surprised to know is actually like really funny or really nice, or really likable? Because all of them seem on camera so obnoxious. And I just wonder, are they different at all when you talk to them? I'm sure you spent a lot of time with them. Was there anyone who you were like, oh, he's not bad, or she's pretty cool?
Yeah, actually a bunch of them. I mean, I'll tell you this, Jim Acosta is actually a pretty nice guy. But I think that's actually the problem, is that when you can be like, hey, good to see you, how are you? And then, 10 seconds later, a camera comes on and they're going after you like a spider monkey jacked up on Mountain Dew. You're like, you can't do that to somebody and think that that's okay, right? I mean, I've always cherished people who I think, are the same in public as they are in private, that you can treat with respect and that you can, are going to be civil and respectful to each other regardless of their differences. And actually what I thought was the biggest issue when I was press secretary is people would, go after me, not like during the briefing, then they'd walk into my office afterwards and they'd say, hey, sorry, man, I had to do that. The editor really wanted that on tape or whatever. Like, well, no, first of all, you didn't have to do it. You chose to do it.
Right.
And I get it, but then don't come back to me asking me like, we're going to go grab a drink after work and be buddies. And, that's just, I learned the interesting thing to your question, Grace, is I learned a lot about people that I had known for quite some time. In some cases where I was like, wow, I never really gave two thoughts about the person. I thought they were a nice individual and probably a pretty good professional. And what I learned is that when the opportunity to seek personal fame or get additional clicks or get some kind of viral moment going, they would take the opportunity every day of the week as opposed to trying to figure out how to conduct themselves in a professional manner or to get a good story. It was all about, if you think about it, and I'll leave you with this. There was, I noted this after I left, right? So you had two people in the press corps briefing room, April Ryan from American Urban Radio and Brian Karam, who represented Playboy, which is just proof that there is actually something to read in Playboy. Both of them got CNN contracts after I left the White House, not because of their top-notch reporting or insightful sourcing and investigative, uncovering something. It was because they had a viral moment where they got up and said something crazy or attacked myself or Sarah or what have you. That's all you need to understand about reporting today in the White House, which is you are rewarded not because you do good work or because you shed some insightful piece of knowledge on a policy or a personnel announcement, but because you've created a personality out of yourself. You've made yourself a YouTube sensation or an internet meme. And I think that to me is the biggest travesty, that when you look at in a normal time, look out at the number of people sitting in those White House chairs, almost all of the print reporters have a cable contract.
Yeah.
Their allegiance is to getting something on cable television every night that is sensational and click-worthy, not necessarily good journalism.
I think that puts it really well, Sean, because I always say it's like, I always play the Mariah Carey clip, There's a Hero. Every time one of these reporters does something, I go, uh-oh, we know who's going to be trending on Twitter tonight because they said something mean to, Kayleigh McEnany or Donald Trump or whatever. And I totally agree with you. It's kind of a warped way to do journalism. That's Sean Spicer from Spicer & Co. You guys can check him out on Newsmax every weekday. You can especially check him out tomorrow when I will be joining him for the quiz at the end of the show. It's going to be really great. I'm going to win. I can feel it in my bones. Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back. This is the Grace Curley Show.
She's never held office, but she paid the whiskey priest's monthly rent once. She's Grace Curley.